"Sorry I'm late, darling," Grayson Whitmore declared, his arm slipping around Fiona Brooks as her cruel ex, Liam, mocked her in front of a stunned crowd. In that electrifying moment, a billionaire's icy heart thawed, stepping in to shield. A brilliant paleontologist from humiliation. What sparked this daring move? Can a man who swore off love and a woman scarred by betrayal find a future together? Join us for a tale of heartbreak, courage, and second chances that unfolds from a dinosaur museum to Egypt's pyramids. Where are you listening from? Drop your city in the comments and share your guess. Will love conquer their fears? Subscribe now and hit the bell to catch our latest stories of passion and redemption. Don't miss how this unexpected encounter changes everything. Comment, share, and let's see if love wins. The Manhattan skyline glittered like a constellation of ambition, each skyscraper a testament to Grayson Whitmore's unrelenting drive. At 38, he stood atop his penthouse in the Whitmore Tower, a glass and steel monolith he'd built from the ashes of his dreams. His real estate empire, Whitmore Properties, sprawled across 5 continents, its portfolio boasting half of Manhattan's high-rises and luxury developments from Dubai to Tokyo. With a net worth of $28 billion, Grayson was a name whispered in boardrooms and feared in negotiations. His gray eyes, sharp as the steel of his buildings, surveyed the city he'd conquered. Yet the reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a man hollowed out by loss. 7 years ago, Clara, his fiancée, had been his sun, her laughter, warming every corner of his life. A boating accident stole her away, leaving him adrift in a sea of grief. Since that day, he'd sworn off love, erecting walls around his heart as impenetrable as the structures he built. In the quiet of his penthouse, the only sound was the faint hum of the city below. Grayson's life was a machine of precision. Board meetings at dawn, acquisitions by noon, and late-night reviews of architectural plans. His 12,000 employees moved like cogs in his empire, each one wary of his presence. Assistants flinched when delivering his coffee. Executives rehearsed their pitches to avoid his cutting critiques. "Whitmore doesn't tolerate mistakes," they'd murmur, and they weren't wrong. His cold demeanor was legendary. His voice, low and controlled, could silence a room faster than a shout. He didn't socialize, didn't laugh, didn't linger. Work was his sanctuary, the only place where the ache of Clara's absence dulled. Each deal, each towering edifice, was a brick in the fortress he'd built to keep pain at bay. But fortresses, no matter how grand, are lonely places. This morning, the air held an unusual bite for early summer. Grayson's assistant, Margaret, a woman with the efficiency of a military general, had cleared his schedule for the afternoon, a rarity he hadn't requested. "You need a break, Mr. Whitmore," she'd said, her tone daring to border on concern. He dismissed her with a curt nod, but her words lingered. A break? The concept was foreign. Yet, as he stood in his office surrounded by awards and blueprints, a restlessness stirred. He couldn't name it, but it pushed him out the door, away from the sterile glow of his computer screen. On impulse, he directed his driver to the American Museum of Natural History, a place he hadn't visited since childhood. The dinosaur exhibit, with its ancient relics, seemed like a refuge where time held no sway, a place to escape the relentless march of his present. The museum's halls were a cathedral of the past, their high ceilings echoing with the whispers of visitors. Grayson moved through the crowds, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the casual tourists snapping photos. The dinosaur exhibit loomed ahead, its massive skeletons frozen in mid-roar. A Tyrannosaurus Rex towered over him, its hollow eye sockets staring into the void. Grayson paused, his hands in his pockets, feeling an odd kinship with these ancient giants, remnants of a world long gone, preserved in their solitude. Clara had loved museums, her curiosity a spark that once lit his own. He pushed the memory down, focusing on the bones. They were safe, unchanging, free from the fragility of human connection. Here, in the shadow of creatures extinct for millions of years, he could breathe without the weight of his empire or his grief. The crowd shifted, and a voice cut through the murmur, a voice vibrant, commanding, alive. It came from a woman standing before a velociraptor display, her words painting a vivid picture of a world where predators ruled. She spoke with authority, her hands gesturing as if coaxing the fossils to life. Grayson's gaze locked onto her. Dr. Fiona Brooks, her name tag read, Paleontologist. Her long, dark hair cascaded over her shoulders, catching the light like polished obsidian. Her presence was magnetic, not because of beauty, though she was striking, but because of the fire in her voice. She described the velociraptor's hunting tactics with a passion that made the air hum, her brown eyes alight with knowledge. For the first time in years, Grayson's phone stayed in his pocket. His world of deals and deadlines faded, replaced by the rhythm of her words. She was unlike anyone he'd met in his polished circles of investors and socialites. Those women fluttered around him, their smiles calculated, their eyes fixed on his wealth. Fiona, though, seemed oblivious to the crowd, lost in her love for the ancient creatures she described. She spoke of their agility, their cunning, as if she'd witnessed them herself. Grayson leaned against a pillar, his usual detachment unraveling. He was no stranger to power, but hers was different. A quiet strength born of intellect and conviction. A child in the audience asked about dinosaur feathers, and Fiona knelt to answer, her smile warm, her explanation clear. The gesture was small, but it struck him. Clara had been like that, kind, unguarded, real. The thought clawed at him, sharp and unwelcome. He wasn't here to feel. He was here to escape. Yet he couldn't look away. Fiona's lecture moved to the Cretaceous period, her voice weaving a story of survival and extinction. She spoke of the asteroid that ended the dinosaurs' reign, her tone softening as if mourning their loss. Grayson felt a pang, not for the creatures, but for the part of himself that had died with Clara. He'd built an empire to outrun that loss, but here, in this hall of bones, it caught up to him. Fiona's words stirred something he'd buried, a flicker of curiosity, a whisper of life. He wanted to know her, to understand what fueled her fire. The realization startled him. He hadn't wanted anything beyond his work in years. His fortress, so carefully constructed, felt suddenly fragile, its walls trembling under the weight of a single voice. As the lecture ended, the crowd applauded, but Grayson remained still, his mind racing. He needed to speak to her, to bridge the distance between his world and hers. But doubt crept in. What would he say? He was Grayson Whitmore, a man who commanded billions, yet the thought of approaching this woman left him unsteady. He straightened, adjusting his cufflinks, a habit, to ground himself. The museum lights glinted off the fossils, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward him, urging him forward. He took a step, then another, his polished shoes silent on the marble floor. Fiona was gathering her notes, unaware of the billionaire whose world she'd just shaken. For the first time in 7 years, Grayson felt the pull of something beyond his control, a spark that threatened to ignite the ruins of his heart. The air in the American Museum of Natural History buzzed with the energy of a crowd dispersing, their chatter a low hum against the towering dinosaur skeletons. Grayson Whitmore lingered near the velociraptor display, his pulse unsteady, his usual composure fraying like an old rope. Dr. Fiona Brooks stood at the podium, her presence a beacon in the dimly lit hall. Her lecture had ended, but its echoes lingered in Grayson's mind, her vivid descriptions of ancient predators, her voice weaving science and story with a passion that felt like a jolt to his guarded heart. She was packing her notes, her long dark hair falling over one shoulder, oblivious to the billionaire watching her from the shadows. He adjusted his tie, a reflex to steady himself, and resolved to approach her. A simple introduction, nothing more. Yet each step toward her felt like crossing a chasm. Fiona's name tag glinted under the exhibit lights, her title, Paleontologist, etched in crisp letters. Grayson had met countless people in his world of high-stakes deals, but none like her. She wasn't posturing for attention or angling for his wealth, unlike the socialites who swarmed his galas. Her focus was singular, her love for her work palpable. He was 10 feet away when he noticed her posture shift, her shoulders tensed, her hands pausing over her papers. A man approached her, his swagger unmistakable. A blonde woman in a designer dress clinging to his arm. The man's voice carried, sharp and mocking, slicing through the museum's reverence. Still digging. Up bones, Fiona? Thought you'd be at some fancy university by now, not stuck in this relic of a place. Grayson froze, his instincts sharpening. The man, Liam Carter, he'd later learn, was Fiona's ex, his tone dripping with condescension. The blonde Vanessa laughed, a high-pitched sound that grated like nails on glass. Fiona's face tightened, but her voice was steady, cutting. I'm exactly where I want to be, Liam. Not everyone chases prestige over purpose. Her words were a blade, but Liam's smirk didn't waver. He leaned closer, his voice lowering to a taunt. Purpose? Come on, Fee. You're wasting your talent on school kids and dusty fossils. Bet you're still scraping by, too. Vanessa's giggle was a cruel echo, her eyes raking over Fiona with disdain. The crowd thinned, but a few onlookers lingered, their whispers adding to the weight of the moment. Grayson's jaw clenched, a rare anger flaring. He'd seen bullies in boardrooms, men who wielded power to diminish others, but this was different. Personal, raw. Fiona's composure held, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of hurt, a wound reopened. Grayson didn't think. He acted, striding. Forward. He slipped an arm around Fiona's waist, his touch firm but gentle, and flashed a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sorry I'm late, darling, he said, his voice smooth as polished steel. The words hung in the air, stunning Liam into silence. Vanessa's mouth parted, her gaze darting between Grayson's tailored suit and Fiona's surprised expression. Fiona's eyes widened, but she caught on fast, leaning into him slightly, her hand brushing his arm in a silent thank you. Liam's smirk faltered, his confidence cracking like thin ice. And you are? He demanded, his tone laced with suspicion. Grayson met his stare, his presence commanding the space like he did in any negotiation. Grayson Whitmore, Fiona's boyfriend, he said, the lie rolling off his tongue with The name carried weight. Everyone in New York knew Whitmore Properties. Vanessa's eyes lit up with recognition, her posture shifting as if recalculating her approach. Liam, though, bristled, his ego wounded. Boyfriend? Since when? He scoffed, but doubt crept into his voice. Fiona played her part, her smile tight but convincing. Since we met at a conference last month, she said, her voice steady, her glance at Grayson a mix of gratitude and curiosity. The tension crackled, a standoff under the watchful gaze of a triceratops skeleton. Liam opened his mouth, but Grayson cut him off, his tone cool and final. We're late for dinner, enjoy your evening. He guided Fiona away, his hand light on her back, her warmth grounding him as they moved through the hall. The crowd parted, their whispers trailing like a wake. Fiona's silence was heavy, her steps measured. Outside, the city's pulse greeted them, honking taxis, the glow of streetlights. Grayson led her to his Tesla Cybertruck, its sleek lines, a stark contrast to the museum's ancient aura. He opened the passenger door, and she slid in, her expression unreadable. Inside the car, the quiet was deafening. Grayson gripped the wheel, his knuckles white before turning to her. I'm sorry if I overstepped, he said, his voice softer than he intended. I couldn't stand there and let him talk to you like that. Fiona's eyes met his, searching, her guard still up. You didn't have to do that, Mr. Whitmore, she said, her tone polite but distant. I can handle Liam. She paused, then added, but thank you. It meant something. Her words were careful, but her gaze softened, a crack in her armor. Grayson felt a pull, a need to know more about her, but her next words stopped him cold. I don't need rescuing. Liam broke my heart once. I don't trust easily anymore. She asked to be let out near Central Park, her voice firm. Grayson hesitated, wanting to say more to bridge the gap between them, but he nodded. Of course. He pulled over, the city's lights casting shadows across her face. She stepped out, her silhouette fading into the dusk, her words lingering like a challenge. I don't trust easily anymore. Grayson watched her go, his heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years. He was no stranger to closing deals, to bending the world to his will, but this was different. Fiona Brooks wasn't a contract to be signed or a building to be bought. She was a spark, bright and untamed, and he wanted to chase it. As he drove back to his penthouse, the city blurring past, Grayson's mind replayed every moment, her voice, her fire, the hurt in her eyes. He'd built an empire to escape his pain, but Fiona had stirred something he couldn't ignore. His phone buzzed, Margaret, no doubt, with tomorrow's schedule, but he let it ring. For the first time in 7 years, Grayson Whitmore wasn't thinking about work. He was thinking about a woman who'd faced down her past with courage and made him want to face his own. The fortress he'd built around his heart trembled, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for it to fall. The Tesla Cybertruck hummed softly as it glided through Manhattan's evening pulse, its sleek frame cutting through the city's chaos like a blade through silk. Grayson Whitmore's hands gripped the wheel, his knuckles pale against the dark leather, though his eyes flicked to the woman beside him. Dr. Fiona Brooks sat in the passenger seat, her posture rigid, her long, dark hair a stark contrast against the cream interior. The air between them was thick, charged with the aftermath of Grayson's impulsive act at the museum, posing as her boyfriend to fend off her ex, Liam Carter, and his venomous taunts. Fiona's silence was a wall, and Grayson, a man who'd toppled empires, felt unnervingly out of his depth. The city lights streaked past, their glow reflecting in her eyes, which held a guarded intensity that both intrigued and unsettled him. Outside, New York thrummed, taxis honked, pedestrians wove through crosswalks, and the skyline loomed like a monument to Grayson's ambition. Inside the car, though, time seemed to slow, each second heavy with unspoken words. He stole a glance at Fiona, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her jaw set, the memory of Liam's cruelty. His mocking words, Vanessa's cutting laughter, lingered like a bruise. Grayson had acted on instinct, stepping in to shield her, but now, in the quiet of the Tesla, doubt crept in. Had he overstepped? His world was one of calculated moves, yet this felt reckless, raw, like stepping onto a tightrope without a net. He cleared his throat, breaking the silence. I'm sorry if I crossed a line back there, he said, his voice low, stripped of its usual boardroom steel. I couldn't stand watching him tear you down. Fiona's gaze flicked to him, her brown eyes searching, sharp with intelligence. You didn't have to do that, Mr. Whitmore, she said, her tone polite but edged with steel of her own. I've dealt with Liam before. I can handle him. Her words were a shield, but her voice softened slightly, a crack in her defenses. Still, thank you. It meant something, even if it was unexpected. She looked out the window, her reflection merging with the city's blur. Grayson's chest tightened. Her gratitude was genuine, but so was her distance, a reminder of the walls she'd built. Walls he recognized, because he'd built his own after Clara's death 7 years ago. He wanted to say more, to ask about Liam, about the pain he'd glimpsed in her eyes, but Fiona spoke first, her voice steady but resolute. I don't need rescuing, you know. Liam broke my heart once, shattered it into pieces I'm still picking up. I don't trust easily anymore. Not men, not love, not even myself sometimes. Her confession hung in the air, raw and unadorned, and Grayson felt it like a punch. He knew that kind of loss, the kind that leaves you hollow, wary of anything that feels too good. He wanted to tell her about Clara, about the boating accident that stole his future, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he nodded, his voice quiet. I understand more than you might think. The Tesla slowed at a traffic light. The ice was city's rhythm pulsing around them. Fiona's fingers tightened around her bag, and she turned to him, her expression firm. Can you drop me off at Central Park? I'd like to walk home. Grayson's grip on the wheel tightened. A protest. Rising, but her eyes held no room for argument. "Please," she added, softer now, almost an apology. He nodded, pulling over near the park's entrance where streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. Fiona opened the door, the cool evening air rushing in, and stepped out. "Thank you again, Mr. Whitmore," she said, her voice a mix of gratitude and finality. "Good night." She turned, her silhouette fading into the dusk, her hair catching the last light like a raven's wing. Grayson sat there, the engine's hum the only sound, his heart pounding in a way it hadn't in years. He watched her disappear, her words echoing. "I don't trust easily anymore." They were a mirror to his guarded existence, yet they felt like a challenge, a spark igniting something he'd buried deep. He was Grayson Whitmore, a man who bent cities to his will, yet this woman, her strength, her fire, had shaken him. He drove off, the Tesla gliding silently through the streets, but his mind was far from the deals and blueprints that usually consumed him. Fiona Brooks was a puzzle, one he wanted to solve, and the realization both thrilled and terrified him. Back in his penthouse, the city sprawled below like a glittering chessboard, but Grayson's thoughts were elsewhere. He poured a glass of scotch, the amber liquid catching the light, and stood at the window, replaying every moment. The museum, her lecture, Liam's cruelty, her guarded confession. He'd built Whitmore properties to outrun his pain, each skyscraper a testament to his control, but Fiona was a force he couldn't command. Her passion for paleontology, her resilience in the face of humiliation, stirred something he'd thought long dead. He set the glass down, untouched, and called his assistant, Margaret, despite the late hour. "I need information on Dr. Fiona Brooks," he said, his voice steady but urgent. Discreetly. Margaret, ever efficient, didn't question him. By morning, a dossier arrived. Fiona was a lead paleontologist at the museum, respected but underfunded. Her work focused on bringing science to underserved communities. She was scheduled to join a dig in Montana next month, excavating a fossil-rich site. Grayson's mind raced. Whitmore Properties had a dormant project in Montana, a resort development on land rumored to hold prehistoric relics. He'd never cared about the site's history, until now. With a few calls, he redirected resources, ensuring the project aligned with Fiona's direction. It was a long shot, a gamble, but he needed to see her again, to understand the pull she had on him. As he stared at the dossier, Fiona's photo stared back, a candid shot from a museum event, her eyes bright with purpose. Grayson traced the edge of the paper, his thoughts a tangle of caution and desire. He'd sworn off love after Clara, convinced it only led to pain. Yet Fiona's voice, her strength, had breached his defenses, a spark in the dark. He closed the dossier, his decision made. He'd go to Montana, not as a billionaire seeking control, but as a man chasing a feeling he couldn't name. The city outside his window glowed, indifferent to his turmoil, but inside, Grayson felt the first cracks in his fortress, a tremor that whispered of life beyond his walls. The Montana Badlands stretched endlessly before Grayson Whitmore, a rugged expanse of eroded cliffs and sun-scorched earth that seemed to belong to another era. Dust swirled around his polished boots as he stepped out of his rented Jeep, the harsh midday sun glinting off his aviators. Whitmore Properties had a stake in this barren plot, a proposed resort site that, until recently, held little of his interest. Now it was a lifeline, a calculated move to cross paths with Dr. Fiona Brooks, whose presence had haunted him since their encounter in New York. He'd redirected his company's resources to this remote dig, a gamble driven not by profit but by a pull he couldn't ignore. The air smelled of dry clay and possibility, and somewhere in this desolate landscape, Fiona was unearthing secrets older than time itself. Grayson scanned the horizon, where a cluster of tents and equipment marked the paleontological dig site. Figures moved with purpose, their silhouettes blurred by heat waves. Then he saw her, Fiona, knee-deep in a shallow trench, her dark hair tied back, her hands deftly brushing dirt from a fossil fragment. She was focused, her movements precise as if coaxing the earth to reveal its truths. Grayson's pulse quickened, his usual control fraying at the sight of her. He approached, his steps crunching on the gravel, and her head snapped up, her brown eyes narrowing in surprise. "What's a billionaire doing in the dirt?" she teased, wiping sweat from her brow, her tone light but laced with curiosity. Grayson flashed a half-smile, shielding his nerves. "Overseeing a project," he said, the half-truth smooth on his tongue. "Thought I'd see what you're uncovering out here." Fiona stood, dusting her hands on her cargo pants, her gaze assessing. "This isn't your usual boardroom, Mr. Whitmore," she said, a challenge in her voice. "But since you're here, want to see something extraordinary?" She gestured to the trench, where a jagged bone protruded from the earth. A theropod. "Jawbone," she explained. "Potentially a new species." Grayson followed her lead, crouching beside her as she described its significance, her passion igniting the air. Her fingers traced the fossil's edge, and he found himself watching her more. Then the bone, captivated by the fire in her eyes. They worked together, her guiding his untrained hands to hold the brush correctly, their shoulders brushing in the tight space. The contact sent a jolt through him, unexpected and electric. As the sun dipped lower, the dig team gathered around a campfire, the night air cooling the scorched earth. Fiona invited Grayson to join them, and he did, feeling out of place among the scientists but drawn to her orbit. Over tin mugs of coffee, she shared stories of past digs, unearthing a triceratops skull in Wyoming, teaching kids about fossils in Harlem. Her laughter, warm and unforced, cut through the night, and Grayson found himself leaning closer, hanging on her words. He'd built an empire on control, but here, under the vast Montana sky, he felt untethered, alive in a way he hadn't since Clara's death. He took a risk, his voice low. "You make the past feel alive, Fiona. I've spent years avoiding mine, but you make me want to face it." Her eyes met his, searching, and for a moment, the campfire's crackle was the only sound. She set her mug down, her expression softening. "My past isn't easy to face either," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Liam left me questioning everything, my worth, my choices. I've built walls to keep that pain out." Grayson nodded, the weight of her words mirroring his own. "I lost someone too," he said, the confession spilling out unbidden. "Clara. My fiancée. A boating accident 7 years ago. It left me hollow until you." The vulnerability felt like stepping off a cliff, but Fiona's gaze held no judgment, only understanding. The dig continued over days, their partnership deepening. They unearthed more of the jawbone, their hands working in sync, their conversations weaving between science and secrets. One evening, as the team cataloged finds under a tarp, a dust storm rolled in, the wind howling like a living thing. Grayson and Fiona took shelter in a tent, the canvas flapping wildly. In the dim light of a lantern, she laughed at his disheveled hair, brushing a streak of dirt from his cheek. The gesture was simple, but it stopped his breath. "You're not what I expected, Grayson," she said, her voice soft, her guard lowering. "I thought I'd sworn off feeling anything, but you make it hard to stay closed off." Her words were a spark, kindling something he'd thought long extinguished. Under a starlit sky, they sat on a rocky outcrop, the dig site quiet below. Fiona pointed out constellations, her voice weaving myths with astronomy, and Grayson listened, entranced. Their hands brushed as she traced Orion's belt, and neither pulled away. The moment stretched, fragile and charged, until she spoke, her tone hesitant. "I've been scared to let anyone in. Liam made me doubt myself, but with you, I'm starting to remember who I was." Grayson's heart pounded, his usual restraint crumbling. "You're waking me up, Fiona," he said, his voice raw. "I've been sleepwalking through my life, building towers to hide from pain. You make me want to live again." The night air was cool, the stars a silent witness to their confession. Grayson wanted to reach for her, to close the distance, but he held back, sensing her fragility. She'd trusted him with her truth, and he wouldn't push. Instead, he offered a story of his own, a childhood memory of finding a fossil on a beach, a moment of wonder before wealth and loss defined him. Fiona smiled, her eyes bright, and for the first time, he saw her walls crack, revealing the woman beneath, resilient, brilliant, unafraid to hope. As they walked back to the camp, their shoulders brushing, Grayson felt a shift, a bond forming in the dust and starlight, fragile but real. The dig site, with its ancient bones, had become a body crucible, forging something neither could deny. Grayson, who'd spent years commanding empires, found himself surrendering to a feeling he couldn't control. Fiona, scarred by betrayal, was beginning to trust again, her laughter a melody he wanted to hear forever. As they packed up for the night, the theropod jawbone lay catalogued, a testament to their shared discovery. But the true find was something deeper, a connection that promised to unearth parts of themselves they'd buried long ago, if only they were brave enough to dig. The Cairo sky burned crimson as the sun dipped behind the Great Pyramid of Giza, casting long shadows across the ancient sands. Grayson Whitmore stood on the desert's edge, his heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and nerves that no boardroom had ever elicited. Beside him, Dr. Fiona Brooks gazed at the towering monument, her eyes wide with awe, unaware of the surprise he'd orchestrated. Months had passed since their Montana dig, where dust and starlight had forged a bond neither could deny. Their connection had deepened through shared moments, late-night talks in New York's museums, her laughter filling his penthouse, quiet evenings where her presence alone thawed the ice around his heart. Now, under Egypt's timeless gaze, Grayson was ready to take a leap he'd sworn he'd never risk again. Fiona's dream to visit Egypt's ancient sites, where the echoes of dinosaurs mingled with human history, had been a quiet confession during a rainy night in Manhattan. Grayson, ever the strategist, had tucked it away, planning this moment. With the precision of a real estate deal, he'd chartered a private jet, whisking her from New York to Cairo under the guise of a business trip with a detour. She'd laughed when he blindfolded her at the airport, teasing, "You're not kidnapping me, are you, Whitmore?" Her trust, hard-earned after the scars left by her ex, Liam, was a gift he cherished. Now, as they stood before the pyramids, her hand in his, he felt the weight of the sapphire ring in his pocket. A Whitmore family heirloom passed through generations, its deep blue stone glinting like the night sky they'd shared in Montana. Fiona's hair caught the desert breeze, her face alight with wonder as she traced the pyramid's silhouette with her gaze. "This place," she murmured, "it's like standing at the edge of time. Dinosaurs roamed when these stones were just sand." Her voice, rich with the passion that had first drawn him, made his chest ache. He squeezed her hand, his usual composure fraying. "You see the world differently, Fiona," he said, his tone low, fervent. "You make me see it too." She turned to him, her brown eyes searching, a smile tugging at her lips. "You're getting poetic, Grayson. What's gotten into you?" Her teasing was light, but her gaze held a warmth that made his resolve waver. The desert stretched around them, vast and silent, the pyramids standing as sentinels to their moment. Grayson had arranged for privacy, no tourists, no guides, just the two of them and the ancient stones. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of sand and history, and as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in hues of gold and violet, he knew it was time. He led her to a spot where the pyramid's shadow fell, a natural alcove that felt like it belonged to them alone. His heart raced, a vulnerability he hadn't felt since Clara's loss surfacing like a tide. He dropped to one knee, the sand, soft beneath him, and pulled the ring from his pocket, its sapphire catching the last light like a captured star. "Fiona," he began, his voice steady but raw. "You've changed everything. I spent 7 years building walls, hiding from pain, thinking love was a risk I'd never take again. Then you walked into my life with your fire, your courage, and you brought me back. You showed me what it means to live, not just exist." Her eyes widened, tears glistening as she realized what was happening. He held up the ring, its weight a promise. This belonged to my grandmother and her mother before her. It's carried love through generations, and I want it to carry ours. Will you marry me? The words hung in the air, a leap of faith under the ancient gaze of Giza. Fiona's breath caught, her hand trembling as she covered her mouth. The desert seemed to hold its breath, the silence profound. Grayson, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I was so afraid to love again. Liam left me broken, doubting myself. But you've shown me it's worth the risk. You see me, not just my work or my past, but me. Tears spilled down her cheeks and she laughed, a sound of joy and surrender. Yes, I'll marry you. Grayson slid the ring onto her finger. Its fit perfect and stood, pulling her into his arms. Their kiss was fierce, tender, a collision of two hearts that had fought their way through loss to find each other. The pyramids loomed above, their ancient stones bearing witness to a moment as timeless as their existence. Fiona pressed her forehead to his, her laughter mingling with tears. I can't believe you did this here, she said, her voice soft, her fingers tracing the ring. Under the pyramids, Grayson? You don't do anything small, do you? He chuckled, his arms tightening around her. Not when it comes to you. The sky darkened, stars emerging like echoes of the Montana nights where their bond began. They stood there, wrapped in each other, the desert's vastness making their love feel both infinite and fragile. Back in New York, their wedding was a tapestry of their worlds, Fiona's vibrant heritage woven with Grayson's understated elegance. The ceremony, held in a historic garden overlooking the Hudson, was alive with color and music, her family's laughter blending with his colleagues' awed whispers. Fiona walked down the aisle in a gown that shimmered like moonlight, her eyes locked on Grayson's, his gray gaze soft with a love he'd thought impossible. As they exchanged vows, he promised to stand by her through every storm, to build a life where her dreams could soar. She vowed to challenge him, to keep him grounded, her smile a beacon in his once dark world. That night, as they danced under a canopy of stars, Grayson held her close, the weight of his past lifting. Fiona had become his home, her strength and fire the foundation of a future he'd never dared imagine. The city sparkled beyond them, but it was her laughter, her touch that anchored him. He'd conquered skylines, but this love, was his greatest triumph. As they swayed, the world faded, leaving only the promise of a life built together brick by brick, under the watchful eyes of the stars and the ancient stones that had seen them begin. Thank you for joining Grayson and Fiona's unforgettable journey from heartbreak to love beneath the pyramids. Their story reminds us that even the most guarded hearts can find a second chance. What moved you most about their tale? Share your thoughts and your city in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Subscribe and hit the bell to catch our next heartfelt story, where love always finds a way. Until then, continue to believe in the power of connection. See you soon.